Hello, good evening, and welcome to today's episode of Boqer School of Government. My name is Chima Christian, and it feels so nice to all have us here back discussing this episode of Boqer School of Government. This is an episode I gladly look forward to teaching, and that I don't come into the class with the arrogance of a teacher who knows everything. I've come just as a student who is interested in learning and who's also interested in sharing the knowledge we have learned. So this is the 15th episode of our Boqer School of Government. For those who don't know, Boqer School of Government is a school where we learn and apply biblical principles to contemporary societal issues, whether they be political issues, public policy issues, governmental issues, and all of those things. So that's what we do here at Boqer School of Government, and it's my privilege to welcome each and every one of us to this 15th class. And today we are studying the topic influencing political and public policy outcomes. Influencing political and public policy outcomes. Leadership lessons from King Ahasuerus Citadel in Shushan. That story could be found in Esther chapter 1 to chapter 10. You will remember that in Boqer School of Government, we said that there are ancient wisdom that we can use to solve contemporary issues. And so today we're beginning to ask the questions. Look, public policy decisions, how are they made? How does a governor make his decision? How does a president make his decision? How does a senator make his decision? How does a senate president make his decision? How does a local government chairman make his or her decision? And how does a federal reps member make his or her decision? How does a parliamentarian make decisions? How do even judges make their judicial decisions? And are they open to being influenced? If yes, how so? And those are some of the questions we are going to be answering and asking first and then answering in this episode of Boqer School of Government. So we're going to read our principal scripture, which is the book of Esther. But before we read the book of Esther, I wanted us to read another place in the Bible, and then we can now come back to the book of Esther, where we will spend most of our time today on. I will read 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 2. 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 2. And I will read from the New King James, from King James Version, Old King James. Then a Lord, on whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might these things be? So my emphasis on then a Lord, on whose hand the king leaned. Okay, if we're going to translate it in the literal term, what it does suggest is that this is a man on whose hand the king leaned. So his hand is like a pillow to the king. But we do know that this is a figure of expression. Now, what they meant is that the king depends on him for his every decision. What we meant is that he is the person closest to the king. What it meant is that he is a special advisor, special assistant to the king. What it means is that if it was in Nigeria, that he would be member of the kitchen cabinet or member of the quote-unquote, what do we call them now? Cabal who runs the system. And that is it. But we also have to go and study King Ahasuerus, who is the primary emphasis of today's reading, and we can find that in the book of Esther. And I'm going to read selected. Of course, you will see the whole story. For you to appreciate it, you might want to read from 1 to 10, but then we're not going to read from 1 to 10 obviously, because we do not have the time. But then I will highlight a few portions of the scriptures that are germane and critical to our conversation. All right, so I'll read chapter 1 verse 10 to 11. The book of Esther, chapter 1, verse 10 to 11. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Caracas, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and to the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. All right, so we see here quickly that the first decision this king took was under the influence of alcohol. If you listen, the Bible said again, on the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded his eunuchs, who served in the presence of the king, to bring his wife wearing his royal clothes. So decision number one, because this man took about 10 political decisions, or something you could call 10 public policy decisions. And then decision number one was that he commanded Queen Vashti to be brought to show her beauty. And there are two details I want us to see from this particular transaction. The first detail is that he made this decision under the influence of alcohol. His heart, the Bible said, was merry with wine. And political leaders usually oscillate between all the ranges of emotions, from extreme pain, extreme anxiety, extreme pressure, to extreme pleasure. So they border on the two extremes. Many times when you see political actors, they are always in the full range of emotions. They can be under intense anxiety, under intense pressure, under intense pain, or indeed under intense, very intense burdens of leadership. And for the most part, to relieve themselves of those pain, they can now try to oscillate between emotions. So in order to move themselves away from the pain, or to move themselves away from the demands of their office, or to move themselves away from the huge responsibility, they sometimes depend on pursuing extreme pleasure. So it's not a coincidence that many political leaders, are given to extreme pleasure. And this pleasure might manifest itself in alcoholism, as we've seen in Citadel and Shushan. It can manifest itself in illicit sex. It can manifest itself in substance abuse. I was reading an interesting article, I think 2 or 3 days ago, and a particular researcher was saying that we should subject Nigerian Senate to drug tests, and that he will pay for the test, because his PhD thesis was on, I've forgotten the political connection and something like that. And I found it interesting that he would think that many of Nigeria's senators and lawmakers cannot pass ordinary drug tests because politicians abuse substances to calm themselves down. Illicit sex is part of it. Music, if you notice, some of them enjoy music. Some of them also enjoy going to clubs and all of those things. Drama, movies, all of those things. Shopping, buying things they don't need. And so many times when you get to a politician's house and you see a lot of cars that they don't use, you see a lot of jewelry that they will never get to use, you see a lot of materials that they will never get to use. Sometimes those impulse buying or extreme buying is as a result of them trying to get out of pain or out of pressure or out of anxiety. And because you will notice this, especially with women, that when they go through a rough patch, and I'm using this as an example, when especially teenagers or early adults, or maybe this can happen to anybody at any age bracket, and when they go through a rough breakup, sometimes they tend to add weight. Why is that? Because they are going through bouts of depression, bouts of anger, bouts of negative emotions. And in order to try to pull themselves out of negative emotions, they can start going shopping. They can be buying things they don't need because of the momentary excitement that comes with buying. They can be eating out, they can be eating things, trying to eat away the pain, so to speak. And within that framework, you will see that buying things offer people momentary pleasure. All right, so you can buy a Ferrari, but then after 2 hours, the excitement had worn out. And that is why many politicians engage in buying, shopping, acquiring resources that they don't need. And this is as a result of their coping mechanism to cope with the extreme demands and the extreme pressure and anxiety that comes with the huge burdens of leadership. And so the kind of pressure, the kind of pain, the kind of responsibility that political leaders face, the average person cannot imagine it, let alone subject themselves to that. And I'll share 2 stories. I've volunteered in many political campaigns, and in one of those campaigns, especially towards the primaries of the campaign, many times I get back to my house around 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. in the morning, and then I had to leave by 7 a.m. and then you walk around the clock because we were doing high intense campaigns. And so what happens is that once I come in by 5:30, I knew that the best chance I had was to take my bath and brush my teeth because I must be in the house of my boss by 7. So once I come back, I brush my teeth, take my bath, and my clothes are ironed already. I'll say, whatever happens, 15 minutes to 7, wake me up. And then I'll be up by then. We do this sometimes 3 days, 4 days, 5 days in a row. No rest. High intense pressure. And this is me as an associate. The boss goes through much worse than that. So the kind of pressure, the kind of burdens that leadership entails, the ordinary man cannot cope with it. You know, the last time I was in Kaduna, I had gone to Kaduna and then I met a very revered friend in the train. And I had mentioned to him that I was going to Kaduna, that I suspected that he was going to attend the conference that I was going to attend because he was one of the keynote speakers. So I said, what flight are you on? So he said, no, I'm not flying. I'm going by train. I said, interesting, I'm going by train. What time is your flight? Is your train? He said, same time. I say, oh, it's the same train that you are on that I am on. So we agreed that we're going to see his hotel the next morning by 7. And then when I got to his hotel, I called his room. He said, oh, he hadn't taken his beats, but he wanted me to come to the room and wait for him to take his beats. And I said, no, sir, I respect you a lot. I don't want to come into your room and wait for you to take your beats. Why don't you take your beats? Let me go to the restaurant and hang around. And he says, okay, if you feel that's fine. So I went to the restaurant and something interesting happened there. Right? I was at the restaurant waiting for him to dress up so I can come and have the quick breakfast meeting with him before he goes out to speak at a conference. And as I was sitting at the restaurant, I was just watching 3 ladies, one in her 30s, the second in her 30s, one possibly in her 20s. So as I was watching these 3 adults, and they were running up and down like headless chickens, calculating, oh no, we served this to 2, 3. So the whole point of their calculation was trying to balance an account over the past 24 hours. And this facility is an exclusive facility. So the facility does not even have up to 15 or 20 rooms. So in trying to calculate the sales of just 24 hours for a facility that doesn't have up to 20 rooms, 3 adults were sweating. 3 adults couldn't calculate the amount of money that was not in my estimation, up to 200,000 naira. And as I was looking at them, you could see that their brain is almost shutting down in trying to calculate the bill of just 24 hours, trying to balance the account. And then the Holy Spirit whispered to my ear, says, you don't have capacity for some things. He said, this person that is fidgeting, look at the obvious lack of capacity in managing transactions like this. Do you think this person can run a shopping mall? Do you think this person can run a multi-million-dollar business? And I was just struck that, look, just a small responsibility of calculating the amount of sales you made over a past 24 hours. And it's not as if you're making too much sales. And you are saying, no, I gave them 2 bottles of water, I gave them 1 bottle of water. And the way they were fidgeting and calculating 1 bottle of water, it obviously showed me that there are some people that just don't have capacity. That yes, they can manage it well when they are calculating money in the hundreds of thousands. But once it comes in the realms of the millions, that their brains will shut down. And there are people, they can manage money, maybe 3 transactions, 4 transactions, but once you approach that money in the realms of hundreds of millions, the brain will shut down. And there are some, once it enters into billions, they can't process it. And that was, I was asking myself, oh, Chima, what's your capacity? What can you manage? Can you manage affairs of a state? Can you manage affairs of a country? Like in my home state, we have 6.2 million people. And if you're made the governor, you are putting out 6.2 million fires at once. Because the health sector is needing emergency intervention. Education sector, the same thing. Police, the same thing. This, the same thing. In fact, once you become elected a president or a governor, imagine it's just, I'm not making excuses for anybody, of course. People here know my disposition towards the incumbent government. But I'm asking, imagine you becoming the president of Nigeria. Your job is putting out fire. By the time you're trying to put out this fire, 10 more has sparked elsewhere. By the time you're trying to deal with this, they have kidnapped school children. By the time you're trying to deal with this, they have done. By the time, it is a constant pressure. Aso becomes like a constant pressure pot that whoever is there is subjected to. And in managing that pressure and anxiety, endless pressure and anxiety over a 24-hour period, then they can now go into drugs. Then they can now go into sex. Then they can now go into buying things they don't need. So sometimes they can just buy 10 SUV just to reward themselves. And then at the end of the day, after 3 or 4 hours, the excitement of buying a new SUV will wear out. They buy themselves the best Rolex, and then after 1 week, the excitement wears out. So they're constantly looking for what to distract themselves with. And this is one of the things we saw in Shushan. That king made his first decision under the influence of alcohol. And so this tells us that many times your political decision makers make decisions under influence. Many of you may have seen the interview where the last, president now of, which of these countries are fighting with Russia? I think Ukraine. He was being interviewed and people were noticing that he was sniffing. It was obvious that he was high on drugs. The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, the last interview of him that trended, they were just asking him questions. His eyes was rolling. He was just sniffing things. You know, the typical behavior of someone who is high on substance. And I say, I understand you. You are fighting a war. I understand. And I know of a governor. This governor, always high on substance. And then his associates knew that Oga is now high on substance. And whenever he's high, he tends not to be very circumspect again. So what they do, this is a real life story that happened in one of the government houses that I'll leave unnamed in Nigeria. Actually, the governor is being in EFCC nets now, trying to clear his name of some things. So what his associates do is that they will discuss a matter with Oga in the morning. And Oga will say, okay, beautiful, make a memo for me to approve. And then they will make a memo for the governor. And they will be hanging around. They will be loitering around. They won't want the governor to see them until that time of the day when the governor has taken 3 or 4 of his favorite bottle. And then now that he's a bit tipsy, then they can now bring the memo. So he just looked at his eyes and said, everything is correct, right? Everything is correct. They said, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. He will just sign off on the memo. Because now, if you presented that memo in the morning, he will read it line by line. If you wait till he's tipsy, he will just scan through and pen his signature. And so they found a way that when you have a business with the governor and he says, I'm going to approve 30 million for this, that you can bring something, maybe the 30 million might not even add up. You can just say, oh, there were additional expenses that we need to cover. Because he's tipsy, he's not in the presence of mind to ask and critically engage documents before signing. And so they have found a loophole within this system that they now wait until the governor is high to send him important documents to sign. Influencing public policy. I'm just building the foundation. After we will discuss practical steps of how to influence public policy. Then, from where we read, the first decision of the king was to bring his wife, to show off the wife. And then eventually the wife disappointed him, said, Oga, I'm not coming. And he was angry. Alright, so when you go to Esther chapter 1 verse 13, then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Kashena, Shetar, Admata, Tarshish, Meres, Masena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. So you see the manner of the king, that anytime he has, the Bible says it is his manner towards all who knew justice. Alright? That he always, anytime he wants to take a decision, he asks for their opinion. Memucan, what do you think about this? And so the king was now angry. What should I do with my wife? He obviously felt insulted. And in his anger, he now asked the people who knew law. And see the question he asked them. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to law? Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by eunuchs. So the king was clear in his questions. I want you to pay attention to this. The king was asking them, what should we do to her according to law? What should we do to her according to law? What, Attorney General, what does the Constitution say? Special advisor on this, what does the law say on this particular issue? Governor, what does the law say on this issue? Minister for Health, what is the law? Does the law say on this issue? Minister for Justice, what does the law say on this issue? Special advisor, special duties, what does the law say? So the man was asking a law and order question. But look at how they answered him. And Memucan answered, Esther chapter 1 verse 16, before the king and the princes. Queen Vashti had not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have had the behavior of the queen. Thus, there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall no more come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. The king asked them, what does the law say about the wife of the king refusing to obey the law, the instructions of her king? And apparently, there was no law for this. Apparently, they did not cite any law. Instead, they started making a new law. The king did not ask them for their opinion. The king asked them, what does the law say? What is the law saying concerning this matter? But guess what they did? They prescribed their opinion, and their opinion became a law. And I began to meditate on this scripture, and I said, what was Queen Vashti's relationship with Memucan like before this incident? Did she treat them with contempt? Were they envious of her? Did she not grant them access to the king? Because obviously, if this queen was in good terms with Memucan, Memucan could have said, oh no, the king, I believe that there was a miscommunication. Well, the queen had misunderstood your instructions. Well, they could have made excuses for her because there was no law. And anything they suggested to the king then became a law. And this is what happens in your government houses. That in many of your occasions, your political decision, the public policy decisions, are things that are recommended by the people closest to the king. If you read the book of Esther, you will see how many decisions this man made. Let's jump to verse 2, chapter 2 rather. Chapter 2, verse 1. After these things, now these things were after he had banished his wife, after all of the things. When the wrath of the king, so his anger now has subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended to him say, let the beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. And the king approved it to be so. So now, the first decision, this man took it by himself under the influence of alcohol. The second decision, he took it by the advice or the recommendation of his princes. The third decision he was taking, he took the decision according to the advice of his servants. These may be cupbearers, people who clean his room, people who wash his sanitary ware, people who clean his toilets. These are his boys. And these boys don't have ranking. They are not necessarily your princes. They might not even, in some cases, there are some personal assistants that have more access and more influence than ministers. And this second decision, because they saw that the king was bored. They saw that the king was, look, he was no longer, he was missing his wife. And he was beginning to regret his decision. And they suggested to the man, okay, let us look for fine babes for you. Let's arrange something. And he said, okay, go and arrange something. And I can tell you for free that by proximity and influence, you can affect public policies. If you read down the book of Esther, when he started having decisions with Mordecai, he called the other man. Who is there? The other man presented himself. And he asked him, what shall be done to a man who the king is pleased with? And that man, thinking that it was himself that the king was talking about, saying, oh, let the royal decree be made. Let him be riding on the king's horse. Let him wear the royal robe. Let them put the royal signet on his ring, a finger. Yet again, the king says, go and do it. So if you audit all the political and public policy decisions this king took, very few of them were original decisions. In fact, less than 20%. And I can tell you for free that this is a replica of what happens in various government houses. That in many of the times, the decisions you ascribe to presidents, the decisions you ascribe to governors, the decisions you ascribe to political office holders may not necessarily be the original ideas. These are the prescriptions of the people around them. In my own local parlance, they say, that's a local adage in Igbo language. So what it loosely translates into is that the king is governing well is according to those who are surrounding him. And you see that this is a scriptural concept. And so that brings me to one of the points I wanted to make. Because we tend to not know how to buy influence and proximity. With my own experience, I believe that political office holders are more vulnerable when they are aspiring for office. They are all more open to accepting people when they are aspiring for office. There was a governor that was elected in my state, and people were saying, oh, we are so disappointed with this government. We thought he would appoint intellectuals. We thought he would appoint this. He's just appointing touts. He's just appointing the volunteers in his campaign organization. He was just appointing, the regular people, the ordinary people. We were expecting him to import his associates, his commissioners, his PA, his whatever, from wherever. And I said to them, look, where were those intellectuals when this one was running around looking for help? I said it would be unconscionable that after these people you called out had shut down their lives and their businesses for sometimes 6 months, sometimes 7 months, following this man without pay, mobilizing votes for him, fighting for him, cursing out people on the social media for him, which is actually part of what people do here in the name of campaigning, but at least volunteering, sacrificing a lot into this man's political aspiration. And then when he enters into office, he now kicks all of them out and now goes to Harvard to import technocrats. And so I'm now beginning to see that some of us are knowledgeable about public policy issues. Some of us, our hearts are in the right place, but we don't have access to the kings because that access is influence. That is the decision you had with the conversation you have with a king today can become a law tomorrow. But you're not in such a place to recommend. And we're saying that there will be another round of opportunities available to us. That some of us who care deeply about issues, some of us who are knowledgeable about issues, some of us who want to see the best outcome for the society, may have to sacrifice and buy proximity. Proximity has a cost. And the best time you can get close to any king is when he's aspiring to become a king. So there are people we know, they are running for governor. For instance, in Edo State, I know of Olumide Atta, who is running to become a governor. And there are other names. I think there was Iwadalo or something. There were other names. There are other names. I think it's about 3 or 4 frontliners. In Anambra, there will be an opening in 2025. I believe also in Kogi had just finished their own. And then in 2027, there will be vacancies in at least 28 to 29 governorship vacancies. And there will be 360 House of Reps vacancies. And there will be 109 senatorial vacancies. And there will be 7, okay, the local government elections are variated in some of the places that have local government elections. But when these vacancies are there, you will see people aspiring, hustling to fill those vacancies. And they are vulnerable because they will need graphics designers. They will need, so people here can offer something. So if you're going to take a vacation in 2027, why don't you try to consider working out your vacation close to an election period so that you can block out 1 month, you can block out 5 months, you can block out 6 months, you can even take an extended leave so that you find and identify potential public office holders who share similar views with you and volunteer for their campaign. And that your volunteer is a price you pay for influence. Now, some people pay that price and use that influence to extract contracts. But this is not you, because you want the best for the society. Some people pay that price and they use that influence to nudge the governor or the politician wrong, if there is an English word like that. And so we have left the space for people who don't have good ideas. And so you can see that, for instance, a particular Ahasuerus could be captured by people who are self-centered. And once the president is surrounded by self-centered people, look, it will reflect in his public policies. Once a leader is surrounded by self-centered people, it will reflect in the way he governs. Look at King Ahasuerus. 10 decisions, almost 8 of them were recommended by his associates. If we are to audit the decisions of the people you call presidents, if we are to audit the decision of Joe Biden, if we are to audit his decision, now there are some people who are more strong-willed than the other. But in many of the cases, they all usually succumb to the influences of the people around them. Because it takes a high degree of presence of mind. Because for you, the decisions you make today is what to eat, what to wear, what to drink. Where to go, should I honor this invitation, should I respond to this? Those are the decisions you make. But for the leader, every day he has to take 100 to 150 decisions. Decision to do this, decision to... There are the foreign policy desk. On the foreign policy desk, there are like 22 memos from foreign policy. There are like 7 memos from Ministry of Health. There are like 18 memos from Ministry of... There are like 22 public policy briefs from the Ministry of Justice on, oh, we wanted to prosecute this ex-governor, because some kind of high-level prosecution does not go on without the president knowing. In fact, the law in Nigeria, there are people you cannot designate as terrorists without the president knowing. So every day this man wakes up, he has piles of decisions to make. And no man has that kind of mental acuity to take those kinds of decisions in quick succession without leveraging the resources around them. Even if you or I become the president today, the volume of decisions we are supposed to make daily, the memos that you are supposed to approve daily, the memo, sometimes you can call it is piling up like this, waiting for you every day. Many of them don't even, that's why all these old men saying that they are becoming presidents, of course you know that's young people that will do the job, because they can't read through the level of documents you need to read. I can imagine someone like Tinubu snoring through a security briefing. People like Joe Biden, they may not tell you, but he might be sleeping off where they are doing the security briefing. If you audit their decision, if we can have access to those classified documents to see, this man took 300 decisions in 1 week. How many of those decisions were his original thoughts and original ideas? you will see that the number, in my own view, is usually less than 20%. That in many of the instances, they succumb to the prescription. Now, there can be competing prescriptions. Of course, the Minister of Justice may say, let us not do this. Then the Minister of Defense will say, let us do this. But eventually, he will rely on either of the two. But that decision is not his original thinking. And so we're now seeing how vulnerable politicians are, seeing how vulnerable public officials are, seeing the kind of demands of office that they have, that we know that they need to rely on people to take decisions. Again, I will read that first scripture I read before, 2 Kings chapter 7 verse 2. Then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God. A Lord, a minister, a commissioner, a personal assistant, a special advisor, a special assistant, on whose hand the king leaned. And this is not literal leaning. This means that the king relies on him for every decision. Within every presidency, people know that there are cabals, people who influence the president. Within every government house, people know that there are cabals or the kitchen cabinet. And since we now know that the vagaries of the office, that the demands of the office demands or puts that no single individual can take this quantum number of decisions in such a short time without relying on chief of staff, what do you think? And then I think that one of the ways, this is not the only way, but one of the ways to influence public policy is by proximity. And we can buy proximity. Now, you may not have that network to start volunteering at that elite level to presidential campaigns, but you can do that at a governorship campaign. And if you have one governor that listens to you, imagine the good you can do. And if you have one minister that says, Chike, what do you think? If you have, even if it's one commissioner that says, Esther, what do you think? Imagine if it is one senator that says, Samuel, what do you think? And we're saying that we can buy that proximity. How do we buy that proximity? The most important time, in my view, you can get it anytime, is during that time that they are jostling for public office. So I'm saying this to encourage a lot of us to volunteer. When you see good people running for office, don't just tell them, go. Don't just tell them, may the Lord be with you. If you can, donate. If you can donate material support, donate your time, your skill. Sometimes the person just needs you to be around. And I believe that each and every one of us here has skills. You can decide to, okay, I can decide to plan it. In 2027, I am coming home 3 months before the election. And I can choose any state. Maybe if there is too much crowd at the presidency, you can choose any state of your choice. And identify like minds. And say, okay, I'm going to support this person. And you are volunteering, you are donating your services, the person is seeing you. And it is usually within the pool of those campaign volunteers that the person has to fill all the vacancies he has to fill. And within all the 100 to 200 or 250 or 1,000 appointments, the person, he will now have the people who are close to him. And those are the people. In fact, in many of the instances, believe me, Tinubu is not the one impacting Nigeria like this. He is the one whose signature is needed, of course, but there are people running him circle. If it is now balance, they're saying that they're doing you dirty. The same thing happened to Buhari. The same thing happened to Jonathan. The same thing happened to Yaradua. I mean, Yaradua's own is quite popular because he was sick. People were talking about the cabal, the cabal, the cabal, the cabal. Yeah, Obasanjo was a little bit stronger. But even at that, he had to rely on people for his decision making. Abacha, same thing. IBB, same thing. If Peter Obi becomes the president in 2027, he will have to rely on people for decision. Now, this does not mean that the president will not have his original ideas. They do have their original ideas, and they have a quality mind. They have, a world view that helps them filter through suggestions. Like if you suggest this, their worldview will help them pick the one that they like. And that's a given. But I'm saying that we can better influence public policy outcomes or political outcomes if we are in the room where we can suggest things to the king. Because obviously they will ask, what does the law say about this? And you can present the law, or you can present your private interpretation of the law. And in many of the instances, they are not able to find a difference. As I close, I want to say that I find many believers, not all of us will become governors, not all of us will become presidents, but we can remain one phone call away from the president. I have had discussions, telephone conversations with people, and it becomes laws. Telephone conversations. Because one of the things I begged God to do for me, I said, don't let me go and teach what I'm not doing. If I don't become this, I will not teach it. It is possible for you to make a phone call, and after discussing with somebody, the next day, the thing you discuss becomes a motion that is sponsored on the floor of Nigerian Senate. Now we don't have to take credit. But at least if you have made so, even if it is marginal impact. I have written letters before to a government house, and after writing the letter, a governor called a press conference and said the exact same thing I said to him in a letter. We can influence public policy outcomes by proximity. The last time, remember we did, I think we're picking them one after. The other time we talked about influencing public policy, we looked at another angle. Influencing from the outside. Today we're looking at influencing from the inside. And I'm saying to people here, and people who will see this video eventually, can we find ways to network better? Because yes, I can shout for 4 years on Twitter, or I can make one call. And there are people who every day antagonizing on Twitter, they are Tinubu is not doing this. But they had the position, they had the opportunity. This governor is not doing this. I'm so disappointed with people. I'm so disappointed with this. But they had the ample opportunity. And I'm saying, where are the intellectuals? Where are the selfless intellectuals? If you allow a government house to be captured by selfish people, then don't complain. Because you that is knowledgeable about, say, economics, about, say, public policy, about, say, healthcare, or in any of the distinct fields of your endeavor, you are knowledgeable about this, and you have the good heart. But now you allow the government to be captured, or the governor to be surrounded by people who are self-centered. And I'm saying that those of us who are here can begin to identify credible lawmakers. It might not even be governors. It might be someone who's running for Federal House of Representatives. And at the end of the day, you come to his house in the evening and you guys are eating. Say, oh, Honorable, this thing that they do no good. Oh. It's no good at all. And he said, what do you think? And you guys have a discussion over a sumptuous meal. And after 1 week, you see him dressed in Abada. That thing that you discussed right in his dining becomes something he's saying on the floor of the Senate. Now, I can tell you, that's one single dinner. There is one single dinner you will have. It will make much more impact than 4 years of tweeting. And we're saying that tweeting is good. Influencing from the outside is good. But also, when we have the opportunity, we can try to network better, volunteer better, for us to get the opportunity to have proximity and influence so that we can influence political and public policy outcome from within. Thank you so very much for attending this session of Boqer School of Government. I will sit back and take questions, comments, and contributions from participants. So if you are on Facebook, please send your comments. And then if you are on Zoom, could you please signify by raising your hand, and then we will take turns to pass around the mic for you to make your questions or contributions. Okay, yes, I see comments here, exactly. I think his request was unjust, especially since the king was drunk. Yes, the king was drunk, apparently drunk. And even the decision to display his wife, is she an object? But I can tell you for free, now I'm not dealing with this king because he's long gone. I am dealing with the kings who are alive. I can tell you for free, many things you call public policies are products of drunkenness.
Really?
That's why sometimes political decision making doesn't make sense. You are like, what the heck is happening here? Are these people thinking? Yes, they are thinking, but they are thinking under the influence. Your senators sniff things. After taking substances, white substances, they now come and argue laws. I saw the video of a senator. That senator is now a governor. But it was an old video. If you watch this video, you know this man is not definitely his right senses to be saying this. So yes, many of your public policy decisions are decisions of drunkenness. Next week, we will be dealing with how political leaders manage stress and anxiety. That's our topic for next week, except if anything comes up that alters it. So that's the topic. I have prepared the curricula, I have prepared the schematics of the class, partially, not completely, and then I have the idea of where the class should go and what we'll take out from the class. Yes, he objectified his queen, and that's very sobering and sad. Yes, that's from you and Ross. And Damilola calls these bedroom decisions. Yes, even the wife or the girlfriends of the king or the man friends of the female leader can also influence decision making. We have seen this in many scandals that got public, but many of them will never get to public spaces. But then the girlfriend of the governor can sometimes influence the governor much more than these things happen. And I'm not recommending for people here to go out prostitute themselves just to have influence, but I'm saying that we can play it right and be in a room where we can influence things for good.
It's quite interesting, I have to say, and I wish there was a way we could leverage it to the lawmakers, people around the lawmakers across, into a series that they can use for their own staff training and what have you. Yeah, I think it's very important. Thank you anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have much. I just want to listen in. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Annabelle, for that. Yes, so we post all our classes on YouTube. So it's called Boqer School of Government. So if you search for Boqer School of Government on YouTube, you will see the full recordings of our classes, but then you also see chunked up portions, bits by bits, like 2 minutes, 1 minute, scattered all across the social media, just in case people want to take on to those bullet points ideas. Then we are also on almost all the music streaming platforms, apart from Apple Music. We are on Google Podcasts, we are on Spotify, we are on Deezer Music, almost all the music streaming platforms. So search for Boqer School on Spotify. Then I also share on my personal YouTube channel, Chima Christian. And so either search for Boqer School of Government on all social media platforms, including TikTok, or search for Chima Christian. You will see snippets of our discussions on those platforms. Yes, someone's hand is still up.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, Mr. Livingstone, good evening.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for the class and the classes we've been having. Personally, I always believe by divine inspiration that when God decides to punish a people, he takes away the teachers, and that as soon as we begin to see teachers emerge in the country, we know that God is about to do something. And I think I've listened to so many teachers coming up, and you are one of such persons that when I listen to you, I kind of get clarity, and I'm super grateful.
And I'm also grateful for the first half of your comments, where you said that you listen to our classes and then that you find clarity. And we thank you for coming to our classes and for inviting your friends to come to our classes, for always engaging some of these materials. I believe, like I keep saying, that Africa's morning is at hand, and then there is a backdrop of knowledge that informs that belief. It's not anchored on emptiness, it's anchored on something substantial. So thank you so very much, Mr. Livingstone. So I think that's where we'll draw the curtains on today's class. Let me thank each and every one of us for coming. And the recording of this video will be made available. It will be on YouTube, on Facebook, on TikTok, and on all music streaming platforms apart from Apple Music, which we are trying to set up. I believe that maybe this week we would have been completed, met the threshold, so we are being published on Apple Music as well. But then please be on the lookout for the recording of this class. And then if you also have the time, visit our platform to see previous recording of other classes we've done. You can listen to them if you missed them. You can also forward some of these materials to your friends, your associates, people who should hear them. If they're not able to listen to the long form content, you can also share the short form content with them. And next week, by the mercies of God, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Nigeria, we'll also be having this class, and we're discussing the stress management of political leaders and all of those things. Next week, it will be such an interesting conversation. If you can, when the flyer is out, maybe before Saturday, we'll make it available, and then if you can, distribute the flyers to your friends, just as a way to invite them to join the conversation. Beautiful. If you can also recommend them to go watch some of our videos on YouTube or Facebook, then that will be all right. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone. From here and from the support staff here, we say that Africa's morning will come.